share with you a little bit about what we're doing over at the museum. Most of you are probably quite well aware of what's been going on with the restoration of this skipjack Rosie Parks, which has been sort of a focus project for us that we dove into. Well, we made a public announcement about it just about this time last year. And if you were wandering around the museum grounds last year, you might have encountered this boat looking rather sad, sitting up, shorn of its rig, its masts, blocked up on land, planks having fallen off the bottom, rotten wood clearly visible on the sides, peeling paint all over the place. Really a rather sad sight. And so now we're embarking on this big 3-year restoration project, and you might well have asked, why bother? Why bother with a boat that is so far gone? And what I want to do is try to explain exactly why we're doing that. A little bit about what we're doing, but more importantly, why we're doing it. Skipjacks have been a symbol of the state of Maryland since the mid-'80s, an official symbol just like the Baltimore Oriole and the Black-Eyed Susan. Maryland has perhaps more state symbols than any other state going on. You know, we've got our own state fossil, the Chesapeake Bay Retriever, our own state dog, and yes, our own state boat. Bet Kansas doesn't have one of those. But Rosie Parks, this particular boat, was brought to the museum in 1975 when it was just 20 years old, when it was really in pristine condition, the pride of Captain Orville Parks, a boat named for his mother, a successful racer, had won more races in the years that he was sailing it, more races at the Chesapeake Appreciation Days races in Sandy Point. He had won more races than any other competitor at the Deal Island skipjack races on Labor Day weekend. It was a great pride that this skipjack was coming to the museum. It was purchased by the museum, and interestingly, a statement on how the state of the oyster industry was back then compared to how it is today. They were a little worried. Certainly, we'd seen some oyster diseases on the bay by 1975 when the boat came to the museum, but there was a handshake deal. This is nowhere written down, but still kind of is in the lore of the museum. There was supposedly a handshake deal that when the Rosie Parks came to the museum, she would no longer dredge for oysters because we wouldn't have an institution competing with the watermen. Almost 20 years later, when one of Rosie's sisters was acquired for preservation purposes by a group up in Havre de Grace. This is the skipjack Martha Lewis. One of the conditions of Martha Lewis's restoration, but at that point in the 1990s, we were thinking oyster dredging is just about finished. This is a dying trade, and part of the deal was we will pay. You can have this money for the restoration of the Martha Lewis so long as she is used for oyster dredging every year. She must go dredging. Rosie Parks, 20 years earlier, has to be removed from dredging. But anyway, Rosie Parks was the first of these skipjacks that was set aside for preservation purposes, and she became one of the most celebrated boats on the bay, a living symbol of the heritage of the Chesapeake. Now, she was a new boat, and let me explain a little bit. Most of the skipjacks were built in sort of this boom period of skipjack building, beginning in the mid-1890s and going up to the eve of World War I. And in that period, somewhere between 300 and 600 of these boats were launched. About half the fleet that we still have today was built in that period. But the teens were hard years. We had a lot of cold winters, a lot of time that the watermen stayed were iced in the harbor. And the 20s were even worse, not cold weather, but declining harvests. And then the Depression hit. And so from this 600 boats, in fact, some years more than 1,000 total boats were licensed for oyster dredging back in the early 20th century. By the 1920s, we were down to about 300 skipjacks. By the 1930s, we were down to about 200 skipjacks. These numbers, economic forces, were causing them to dwindle. World War II, all of our boys go off and fight in the war. And because they're off in Europe and in the Pacific, the oyster beds actually get a break and recover a little bit. And so in the post-war years, there's this mini boom of skipjack harvests. And there's enough money being made in this trade that that some of the watermen start ordering new skipjacks. And we see about 10 or 12 new skipjacks constructed in the 10 years following peace. Rosie Parks is a product of that. She was launched in 1955 with two sisters, with the Martha Lewis that I've already mentioned, and with the Lady Katie, which is still owned by Cambridge Waterman. Built by a man who, yes, he built another skipjack. He built the Wilma Lee earlier, but who was a celebrated skipjack, a celebrated boat builder from Lower Dorchester County by the name of Rosie Parks. Best known for your classic waterman's dead rise workboats, the sort of thing with an open cockpit aft and a small cabin forward, the sort of versatile boat that's used for oystering and crabbing and clamming and eeling and all that stuff. But he got this commission to build a skipjack. In fact, he went and built 3 skipjacks, 4 family members. The Rosie Parks, the first of these boats to be completed for his own brother. Rosie Parks and Orville Parks were brothers. Bronze ahead, they both started out, their father was a dredger, they both started out on dredge boats, they both started out in oystering, but Bronze fairly early on decided that he wasn't much interested in this, and he got involved in boat building. In his life, he's thought to have built some 400 boats. Highly celebrated boat builder. We actually have, I think, 3 boats built by Rosie Parks in our collection at the museum. He's a big man, big in stature, and a big presence in the community. The founder of the Lakes and Straits Fire Company down in Wingate, his hometown, built really right next. The fire company built right next to his yard. In fact, when they expanded the fire company, it was built into the area where these 3 skipjacks, the Rosie Parks, the Martha Lewis, and the Lady Katie, were built. He was the sort of person who really bound the community together. And tragically, in 1958, he had a customer, an attorney from Washington, sort of clearly a crazy guy, who came, argued with him over a bill for a boat. The argument ended with him drawing a revolver and killing Rosie Parks. And it was devastating to the community. There were people in Wingate, people in Lower Dorchester County, vividly remember the day that Rosie was killed. It drove the family apart. He was a man who bound people together, and it was such a shattering event that his family effectively scattered to the winds around the country. Didn't want to talk about this very much. And it's been such a rewarding experience for us that out of this tragedy, that we have said, because of the importance of this boat, it's not intrinsic in the boat that this boat is important. What's important about this boat is all the stories that it can be used to tell, all the stories about people, about this champion dredge boat sailor, racer, Orville Parks, about the celebrated boat builder, Rosie Parks, about the crews and so forth that worked on these boats, where we've met Theodore Cephas, an African-American from Vienna, who was Orville Parks' first mate on this boat. It's about all these stories. And so last year, when we made the announcement that we're going to embark on a 3-year restoration, and we think we're going to restore this boat. We're not going to have it inspected to carry passengers, because that would entail too many changes in the boat. We're going to respect the way this boat was built, so that when you go and look at the way this boat is reconstructed, it will reflect the techniques, the boat built, the signature, if you will, of the original boat builder, of Rosie Parks in it. We have this opportunity. This is the last of the historic skipjacks that has never gotten substantially rebuilt. We have the opportunity to preserve it in a way that reflects the intention of the of the builder.